Hi, everybody. This is the Stephen D. Kelley Show. My name is Stephen D. Kelley, broadcasting from La Puente. This is Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. I'm thinking that we're supposed to be being simulcast at the moment right now, but I'm not sure if she got the time right. Darn it, I don't have the name of them in front of me. I really apologize. Hopefully it'll come to me. But anyway, I'm focused on this right now. Okay, it is Thursday night. It's now 6:01 p.m. and it's 6/11/2020, i.e. June, I believe that is, June 11th, 2020. Now, the title of the show tonight is The Physics of Healing. Now, basically what we're going to do is we're going to take some hardcore physics, and not metaphysics, but actual physics. And we're not going to go too deep into the lambdas and the mu's and what have you, but we will talk about energy and electricity and magnetism and the laws that govern it, but mostly we'll be talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, our entire reality is based on the electromagnetic spectrum. Everything, every phenomena in the universe that basically makes up our reality, which is the 3D, not dimension now, but the density that we talk about, is on that electromagnetic spectrum somewhere. So we're going to talk about the electromagnetic spectrum, and I'm going to say to you right now, without going too much further, that I was wrong my entire life. I thought I knew what it was all about. And I'll explain to you why, and that is because we knew that when energy travels, information travels in the opposite direction. So we already knew that this wave propagation, if you will, has a distinct dual axis movement pattern, like an oscillation almost. And we're going to find that this is a constant in our universe, our known universe, and all the rules always apply. And we're going to see things that will basically explain almost every phenomena you can imagine. And it's so simple once you understand the physics. So, again, it would be helpful if I had the ability to show you the pictures, but I'm going to do my best to describe it for you. And if you can, I do recommend you take some notes, because personally, when I got some of this information, I had to and just sit there and dwell on it for a little while, because all of a sudden a lot of things started to make sense, and a lot of things were being validated, especially things that we take for granted in the metaphysical world. But I'll just say this, that Nikola Tesla did say that science would never progress very far unless scientists embraced the metaphysics or metaphysical phenomena. So what you're going to see, if you consider the stuff that we talk about, is the sort of thing that was going on in the brain of Tesla, which enabled him to learn and understand things like motors and generators and scalar. We talk about scalar a lot, but much to my surprise, the entire electromagnetic spectrum produces one big scalar interferogram that contains all the information in the universe in one big, long, infinite yardstick. So this is amazing, because when you understand how these things work, you'll understand how a human, with the power of their little brain and their modulating cells and their body, their radio transmitter body, how does it transmit this information? How does it receive this information? How can it travel at the speed of light from one vector to another? It's not magic. When you understand how a radio works, when you understand how the electromagnetic spectrum works, when you understand how magnetism, electricity, electrons. When you understand the relationship with all these things, you'll see that with a wave of your hand, you can send an electromagnetic wave vectoring along a propagation path directly to a target, which is another person who is a receiver, a radio receiver, and how they can take that information and they can alter their entire body with it, change their DNA, because everything in their body is part of that radio. Every cell is a receiver. Your entire body is an antenna. Everything is redundant. So once again, I do recommend that you take some notes, and just real quick, I'm just going to say, yeah, we are Truth Cat Radio. If you want to help out, send something to the PayPal, which is StephenKelley714@gmail.com. Okay, say friend or family. Now, the quickest way to understand electricity, of course, is to talk about motors and generators. Well, basically, they both work the same way, only in reverse. If you move one part of it, it makes electricity. If you move another part, it makes energy in the form of movement, rotation. So it's very simple. So what's changing? It's either an electric field or a magnetic field. You put electricity into a motor, it causes a change in the magnetic field, which causes the thing to rotate. If you put a magnetic field into a generator, it's going to create electricity. In other words, if you move the rotator and it causes a magnetic field to be created, that will move electrons and give you electricity. So that's one of the key things right there, is that if you change an electrical field, it will change the magnetic field. And if you change a magnetic field, it will change an electrical field. And what's most important is that each of these things is equal. So at any given time, if you change one wave of this, another wave is going to change. The wave that's traveling in the opposite direction is going to change an equal amount. So this is a constant. And the one thing that we also know that's a constant is that all of this happens at the speed of light. Every phenomena, everything out there in our little world, all this energy travels at the speed of light. That's one convenient concept. It's actually been proven, but it's one of the things that we know, and when we understand that, it helps us to see how all this stuff works. It's really poetic. Now, let's say we want to create a current, or let's say we have, for instance, one of the most important things you have to understand, and this is basically how batteries work. This is the male-female thing. This is the movement of energy. We call one side plus, and we call the other side minus. The plus always wants to go towards the minus, and the minus always wants to go towards the plus. Okay, so there's your opposite opposing energies, your male and female. Now, in metaphysics, we like to say that the male energy goes down and the female energy goes up. So technically, they're on the minus side. We're on the positive top. The guys are up there on the positive side. They have the positive charge. Now, mostly when we talk about energy flowing, we think about, when we're making electricity, we only think about the positive going towards the negative. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. But just understand that it always goes back in the other direction. But for the purpose of understanding a field, an energy field, we're going to talk about the relationship between the plus charge and the minus charge. And the field is the space between the plus charge and the minus charge. Whatever that space is, that's basically going to determine what that amount of energy is. So if you move the plus closer to the minus, or vice versa, backwards, away from each other, you're going to change the amount of energy between those two objects. Now, what's really important here is the concept of movement, because everything is based on movement. Without movement, there is no life. Without movement, there is no change in field density, magnetic density from one object to the next object when it moves from the field through another field. No energy is created. So there has to be movement. Abracadabra, wave my hand. Think about it. I kind of like to apply this analogy to sex myself. I think that's a great analogy as far as movement and frequency are concerned, but let's not get into that. All right, so now basically what this means is that if you can cause these charges to move, you change everything. You change not just the current, which is the field between these particles, but you also change the corresponding magnetic field that is created by the current movement. We'll talk about that. One of the things that's fun to talk about in the metaphysics thing, of course, is that we say that the male energy, when it travels downward, it goes clockwise. That's why I say that it comes out of my left hand and goes in my right, because it makes that nice circle in front of me. Whereas a female, it works in the opposite direction, going up. Interestingly enough, this also corresponds to the concept of the helix in our DNA, which has two opposing helixes going in clockwise direction and counterclockwise. And no, you can't just flip it over like a spring and create opposite a helix. It doesn't work that way. But that's what makes your DNA. And remember, those are antennas. But here is the scientific background, or shall we say, information that will help us understand how this isn't hocus pocus. This really is what it is. So when I say metaphysics and I say things like male-female energy, remember all of those other modes out there, such as Reiki or chronic healing or praying, or even sleight of hand for that matter, they all basically work under the same concepts and the same, shall we say, intention to cause change, and they use the same laws. So if we look at this charge, the plus and minus charge, think of a wire. Think of a wire that's standing straight up. Think of that top of that wire is on the plus side, and the bottom is the minus. So, of course, that would say that the electrons, or the charge, is going downward. Now, that field, that distance between the charge, the positive and the minus, we're going to call that E, or current, or movement. Okay? Because remember, depending on where the distance is, it will determine how much space there is in time, and that determines the movement. If positive and negative charges were right on top of each other, there'd be no field because they're right next to each other. You couldn't measure any kind of field. That would equal zero current, kind of like a place on a sine wave where it passes through zero. Now, of course, when you look at a sine wave, that sine wave dips below zero sometimes. Well, that's when the positive charge has moved past the negative charge and it's now below it. Why would it do that? Oh, I don't know, because we made it do it. That's called oscillation. So that's what sine waves do. They oscillate. They go up and down. Radio frequencies. We're going to learn what all words like frequency really mean and stuff like that. But anyway, so E equals current or movement. Now, and this is really important, when that E field is created, there's also a B field created. The B field is the magnetic field. Remember, you change the E, you're going to create a B. You're going to change the B, right? You change the electric field, you change the magnetic field. So if you move something X amount, it's going to generate X amount of change in another area. Well, that B field basically means that when that electricity travels down that wire, what happens? The magnetic field starts spinning around that wire. How does it spin around? If it's going down, it goes clockwise. Okay, there's that male energy thing. If it's going up, it goes counterclockwise. Now, you may think, what is that? Well, basically, that E and that B, that is the electromagnetic spectrum right there. The combination of those two. And we'll explain how that is. But for now, you need to understand that anytime you move current or electricity or electrons, you're moving it from from positive to negative down a length of wire, there's a magnetic field that basically revolves like a helix around that entire wire, the entire length of that wire from point A to point B. And we know that it basically follows a rule. They call that the right-hand rule. And this is kind of fun because you can do this yourself right now to help you understand what I'm talking about. So when we understand how the electromagnetic frequency or waves operate, the entire electromagnetic spectrum, we have to understand, first of all, that yes, it's a sine wave from point A to point B. It's an infinite sine wave that changes ever so slightly as it goes along, either through number of times it changes frequency, which is the number of times it passes through zero. Starting at very small, of course, number of times, going up to very large number of times. But what I didn't know is it goes in the opposite direction, the exactly opposite way. Now I'm an optics guy, which means that when I look at everything, in my world, it's all about light. And basically, E and B, what is that? It's light. What are we talking about? What are these waves? Light. Does the sun put out electromagnetic waves? Yeah, we call it light. Do our bodies generate light? Yeah. Does that mean we generate electromagnetic waves? Yeah. What are the electromagnetic waves we put out? The light we make. How do we make the light? Our cells oscillate. What does that mean? They go up and down? Yeah. Back and forth? Yeah. They vibrate? Yeah, sort of. They resonate. That's a vibration, sort of. But yes, every cell in your body is moving back and forth. And that produces a coherent light. And coherent means that the rays coming off of those cells are parallel to each other, like a little mini sun. So in other words, you have light rays radiating from every cell in your body outward. And what is that light? That light basically is the entire electromagnetic spectrum that your body is capable of putting out. We don't even know what our bodies are capable of putting out. We know what we look like with visible film. We know what we look like with infrared cameras. We know what we look like with Carillion cameras. Maybe someday we'll be able to have a camera that'll be able to photograph your soul. You know, little things like that, or perhaps what you might have looked like 1,000 lifetimes ago. But you know, when you understand what we're talking about tonight, you'll understand that, yes, this is all possible. So what we want to talk about is how a wave propagates. So let's say, first of all, this right-hand rule thing. Let's say that the wave is going up and down, that sine wave is going up and down. So if you were to hold your hand, palm up open, finger straight, thumb up, and you point your hand in a direction. like you're pointing your finger at somebody, only all your fingers are pointing at somebody. Your hand is straight up like you're pretending to shoot them, only with a four-barreled gun. Okay, the direction that you're pointing your hand in is the direction of the wave propagation. That's the direction this wave is traveling. That's the axis of travel. Now those four fingers going straight up and down, that is the axis of E, okay, or current, or movement. Okay, that's half the equation there. So it goes up and it goes down. So in other words, if the plus and minus are far apart, it goes way up. If the plus and minus are close together, it goes down, and vice versa. If there's zero, passes through zero. If the plus is on the bottom, the wave is on the bottom. Now every time this thing passes from zero up, down through zero, down to the bottom and back up to zero, that's a wavelength. That's one wavelength. That's a wave, a sine wave. You define a single sine wave by that first trip it makes from zero up, back down through zero, and back up again to zero. Okay? So that's your basic sine wave. So it's traveling up and down. And remember, you have your hand flat. Okay? So it's a single dimension. It's flat. If you rotate your hand palm down, that's 90 degrees. But you're pointing it in the same direction. So that means now you're 90 degrees perpendicular. We also call that orthogonal. We use words like that in the optics business, but unfortunately I haven't really had the opportunity to use a word like that in quite a while, so I try to avoid it. But if you're taking notes, we can throw that out there. So basically what that means is the entire electromagnetic spectrum travels in an orthogonal way. Once again, I had to go back and really chew on this because, like I said, I'm an optical guy. And in my world, it goes from left to right. In my world, ultraviolet is on the left because it's the small numbers, and on the right side is where the big numbers are, like the infrared. That's how my rainbow works out. Well, guess what? The rainbow hasn't changed. That rainbow actually is that way. But on the electromagnetic spectrum, I find out the infrared comes before the ultraviolet. I thought, wait a minute, Professor, that doesn't sound right. Until I realized that I'm looking at the wavelength of lambda, the opposite field, the magnetic field, coming in the exact opposite direction as the current or the movement. So what's the difference between the two? Well, it's pretty important actually. The light one, the one coming back, is your male energy, and of course the one going away, the one we use to measure, is the female energy. Anyway, we're calling that E, right? So let's look at the electromagnetic spectrum, how it really is. E, we'll call that radio. And B, we'll call that wave, lambda. Or let's call, well, radio is measured in frequency in hertz. Okay? When you tune it. You tune it in frequency in hertz. On your radio dial, and that's really the way we understand the electromagnetic spectrum, you move from left to right. You could draw this if you want, but basically you've got a big long line. And all the way on the left side of the line where it starts, will start out with 10 to the third power, roughly. And if you go down towards the right, left to right going here, you go up to 10 to the ninth power. Now you're talking, that's the radio wave. That's the area of the dial that we consider radio. Then you go a little bit more, you go from 10 to the ninth to 10 to the 10th, again, traveling from left to right. Now you're in the microwave region. Remember, microwave cell phones, microwave ovens, cookie body. This is the dangerous area. Well, lo and behold, from 10 to the 10th to 10 to the 14th, now you're talking infrared. I'm like, wait a minute, that should be UV. No, I was wrong. Remember, the numbers are getting bigger. As it travels from left to right, the numbers are getting bigger. And then we get to 10 to the 14th, 10 to the 15th. That's a little tiny area. That's visible. That's what we see. That's our little colored rainbow section. All right. And then after that, of course, is ultraviolet, which is 10 to the 15th to 10 to the 16th. And then we get into X-rays. Of course, X-rays are not healthy for you. And then we get into gamma rays. Gamma rays stop at, 10 to the 22nd. Okay. And once again, this is measured frequency, measured in hertz. Now, what is frequency? Once again, frequency is the number of times that the thing goes through zero, from point A to from zero up, down to zero, downward, back up again to zero. That is a wavelength. Now the distance that travels, the distance it takes for that thing to go up and down, the more times it goes through, within a given space, the more times that thing travels up and down within a given space, that is the frequency. It's really easy to remember because it's going up and down frequently. The frequency is going up. It's really doing it a lot. There's your FM radio. You change the times that the sine wave is going through zero within a given section, or basically in this case a section of the ruler or the electromagnetic spectrum. In that particular section of the electromagnetic spectrum, the sine wave's going up and down a lot. It's oscillating. It's going up and down a lot. We're going to talk about the significance of going up and down a lot real quick. And of course, your AM radio is amplitude, and that means how high up it goes. All right? Now, typically, your FM radio, it's going to go up to 1, down to 0, down to -1, back up to 0. That's your basic sine wave. It does that a lot between point A and point B. That's changing the frequency. Now, if you want to change the AM or the amplitude, you're basically going to go above or below 1. You might go 2, 0, 1, 0, 3, 0, 2, 0. See? The wave's going all over the place. That's amplitude modulation or AM radio. They don't do that much now. They just move the thing back and forth. And they move it back and forth by either adjusting the antenna or the capacitor, which is what we're going to talk about, because radios are a great way to understand what's really going on. But before I do that, I want to get back to this electromagnetic spectrum thing. Well, if you look at that spectrum that we just drew out, starting at the left with radio and moving up to gamma rays, one thing we should mention that's really important is that the wave particle thing, we know that energy sometimes, or light, will act like a particle, and we know that sometimes it acts like a wave. What the hell does that mean? Well, if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, that's pretty simple. If you go all the way down to one side, on the radio side, everything on that side acts like a wave. Okay? How do you find it? Well, you put up an antenna, it captures the wave, and you can detect a signal and do all this stuff. With this stuff that we're going to learn, you can do all this stuff, make radar and stuff. That's what radar is. Radio detection and, distancing, I believe it is. Something like that. I don't know. Anyway, that's what radar means. Is it? I'll look at the acronym later. But anyway, radio, that's what that is. Radar is radio. That's where it meant. All right. So, but on the other end of the spectrum, on the high numbers, when I said you get into gamma rays, how do you find a gamma ray? You can't, because they're like little particles traveling through the universe. Remember, a wave traveling through the universe, that's what it is. It's a big, long sine wave. You can actually quantify how long it is. Remember, it's traveling at the speed of light, and you can calculate how much area it occupies. The surface area. it's like a big rectangle, or actually more like a cylinder, if you will. But if you picture energy traveling in a four-dimensional way, remember I said it rotates. It's like a big cylinder traveling at you, like a big tube coming at you, solid cylindrical thing coming at you. That's what energy is. Now, when you understand that, you'll understand that you can do things like magnify it, amplify it, do all kinds of crazy things. You know how you amplify it? My God, you take a magnifying glass and you stick it point it at the sun just right, and you can fry little ants. That's the same damn thing. You've taken that cube and you've turned it into a point now. Okay, that's a focus. But underneath this spectrum that I told you, the one that's the all radio, we call E, is the B. Now, remember I said the rainbow for me travels in the other direction? Well, it does, only it starts where gamma rays are at. And on this one, it's wavelength, which is light, and we measure light in meters. And, of course, an increment of the electromagnetic spectrum, the one that I grew up with, is nanometers, which are tiny little billionth of a sliver of a wave, which we identify with the symbol lambda. So basically, wave meters or wavelength is lambda. Anyway, it starts at the down where we have gamma rays. Now it's going to be 10 to the minus. Remember, the other one is 10 to the 22. That's a big number. Now you've got 10 to the minus 13. That's a little number. Okay, but that's for me. That's the that's the other side of the spectrum. And then it goes up to say where the other one starts, which is 10 to the 3 radio. Well, for this side, that's 10 to the 5 meters. Okay, now here's something interesting you got to understand also, is that this electromagnetic spectrum thing, the thing that we're basically going to describe here is two sine waves, one laying flat and one going up and down. One is measured in hertz, that's radio frequency, and the other one is measured in meters. That's a linear spatial thing. Okay, you understand? Think about that for a second. One is actually tangible. You can identify with something that's X fraction of a meter long. Oh yeah, that's what this is. But the whole frequency thing, no, that's this imaginary line going up and down through another imaginary line so many times. This is the nature of information versus energy. Remember, we said how energy travels in one direction in information, so it's pretty easy to see the information part of this thing is the frequency. That makes sense, right? It's carrying how many times it goes up and down, so it's telling you there's the information. And as we said, the light, the wave portion of it, my little world, is exactly equal. So in other words, whatever that radio frequency is doing, the exact same wave pattern is happening exactly 90 degrees orthogonal, opposite polarity, there's a good word for you, right on the same axis of propagation. In other words, the same axis the wave is traveling. So if the signal goes out in one direction and it's x long, it's going to be going in the exact opposite direction, equally x long, carrying the entire electromagnetic spectrum in an energy form. So right there, try to understand, if you send out a radio frequency, it's going to have an equal energetic quantity, equal to that radio frequency. By the same concept, the exact opposite is true. If you send out energy of a certain frequency, it will produce a corresponding frequency pattern exactly corresponding exactly to the energy pattern. And it all travels at the speed of light, which gives you a very wonderful, easy to understand constant, such as, what is the speed of light? We call that C, E equals mc squared, right? Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Okay, so C, what is C? C is equal to F times lambda. That means frequency times wavelength. So, that's so damn simple. You look at the damn electromagnetic spectrum, you look at any point on the electromagnetic spectrum, be it energetic or frequency, and if you can quantify that frequency or you can quantify that energy, you can plug it in there and do the math, and you can know, since you know what the speed of light is, hang on, I'll tell you what the speed of light is here in a second. It's basically, what is it, 3, hang on, I'll give it to you. Oh, well, 2, where is the speed of light? Where is it? Anyway, it's 3 times 10 to the 8th power, or something of this nature. We've probably got it down here somewhere. But anyway, oh yeah, here it is. Speed of light, or c, which is light, basically. Whenever we talk about light, we talk about c, is a constant. It's basically 3 times 10 to the 8th power. Okay, so that means 10 with 8 zeros, basically, something like that. And then this is meters squared. Okay, so there's actually some volume spatial thing. Now, we should also point out, before I go too much farther, just for the people who enjoy this little bit of the physics stuff, is that in our little world, the visible world, which is basically somewhere in the center of this electromagnetic spectrum area, we have reality, or matter, or light, or energy, whatever you want to call it, that acts like a wave and a particle at the same time. It's almost like a big sine wave, if you will, and we're at the point where it's zero, where it's like on one side it works like a particle, on the other side it works like a wave. But that also allows for some very funny, well, let's just put it this way, it's easier to measure things this way, but it also makes it easier for us to utilize light as a particle or a wave. And this is important because as a particle, you might want to use that light to, say, push your spaceship, or, well, that's one of the greatest uses, of course, or use it as a weapon, of course. But as a wave, you might use that to, say, alter somebody's reality, maybe do some time travel, something like that. But once again, all this stuff is basically, it's just math. All right, so let's say, just so we understand, so that you can understand how the healing works, you want to first look at a radio, okay, an antenna for a radio. Now, typically, if you look at, say, a radio like an old receiver, or one on your car like they used to have, it's going to go up and down. Okay, it's a big piece of wire that goes up and down. Usually you can change the length of the thing, and you can kind of wiggle it one way or the other to supposedly help you catch the beam. A lot of times they used to say that the length of the wire, at least this is what we did in CB world, would be the exact same length of the size of the wave. So it was like a net designed to capture waves of that particular size, or in that general area. Almost like the window on a microwave oven might have a screen and they'll have little holes. Do you think, oh my God, how do those microwaves not go through the holes? Well, the holes are of a certain size so that the little squiggles of microwave can't get through them. If they're a little bigger, a little smaller, it might be a different story. Anyway, that's how that works. But let's say that you've got this metal antenna sitting there, and that metal antenna is made up of, molecules and things like electrons that have a charge. Now, is there a charge? Is there a current? What is a charge? A charge is typically when there's a current. When you plug something into a wall, electricity starts flowing through that wire. Now you have a current. Part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Remember, what do we call that? We call that E. Okay? Well, basically what happens, a wave is traveling at that thing. Now remember how the thing's traveling up and down? Remember how I told you that the wave, if you hold your hand out, oh, here's the most fun part of the hand thing. I didn't even tell you, sorry. You got your hand pointed with your fingers forward, your four fingers forward, your thumb point up. If you close those fingers while that thumb is still pointing up, you have now proven the right-hand rule, because basically what that means is if you look at your thumb, and that is the direction that the sine wave is going up. Let's say the sine wave is going up, but it's traveling. You're pointing your four fingers in the direction it's going. That's the propagation direction. But your thumb up is where the plus is on that wave. If you close your fingers now, you'll know that that magnetic field is going where the direction of your fingers. Your fingers are now pointing counterclockwise to your upward thumb. This is on your right hand, of course. If you point your right hand with your thumb down, and you look at your fingers, you're going to see now your fingers are going clockwise. That's your male energy. That's the right hand rule. The universe follows this right hand rule. That's how it works. So it's all depending on the direction of the propagation from point A to point V, where it starts and where it ends, like the sun, energy coming out of the sun and hitting you. The path that it's traveling from the surface of the sun to your back, that's the propagation path. That's a wave. It's traveling through space like a big squiggle coming right at you, like a tube. Now that's how energy travels. On a radio, what do? That energy, or that when that wave hits the wire or hits the antenna, those electrons inside the antenna follow that path of that squiggle. If the squiggle is up on the top, they go towards the top. If the squiggle is down on the bottom of the squiggle, in the minus side, they go down. What does that mean? That means that the radio wave coming at that thing at the speed of light causes the molecules or the electrons inside of that piece of metal to go up and down at the precise frequency of the signal. Now this, of course, if you put a wire on one end and go to the other, and you put it through a coil and then a capacitor, and then you take another coil off that one, an oscillator, and then you put that into an amplifier, suddenly you can hear it. And by changing the capacitance, moving your tuner, which is just a big capacitor, you move that back and forth, or you move the antenna, you can change what it sounds or the size of the wave coming in and what channel you get. That's all it is. But without an amplifier, you can't hear it. It's too weak. You got to boost it. It's always there. All it is those electrons going up and down. Only now you've hooked up to a thing that uses a lot more power, and suddenly you've got more power going up and down, and then they'll take that up and down movement and they'll connect it to a coil, which is basically next to a magnet, and there'll be a diaphragm on it. They call that, and it'll make the diaphragm go back and forth, which causes the air to move, and that's a speaker. Okay. Now, healing works very much the same way. Exactly the same way. Now, bear in mind that when you understand these rules and how you can't change one without changing the other, and how if you want to change something, all you got to do is change the other. And if you want to change the other, you change the other one. Now, our bodies put out FM. There's your frequency. Our bodies also put out light. There's your wavelength. Now, as I've said, your brain has two sides, right and left. There's that dipole thing. One side puts out a flat signal, and one side puts out a horizontal signal. Call it what you want. Frequency, wavelength, male, female. Anyway, they go and they create a really nice wavefront, or let's just say a electromagnetic wave. The size of it and the length of it And the information contained in it and the strength of the light that you're putting out is up to you. So you want to do magic. Okay, first of all, how does it work? Let's just go straight into how the magic works. You already know that your body puts out light. You already know that your body puts out a frequency. Now, the frequency, let's say you have an intention. You have an image of a person. You have this information of what that person looks like, and you've established their coordinates and their everything because you know this person. You're looking at a photo, whatever. That's enough information from a frequency standpoint to locate that person, because that's how reality works. All reality can be found somewhere on the electromagnetic spectrum. So the various manipulation of the electromagnetic spectrum via frequency or amplitude will basically recreate whatever it is that you are. Every aspect of you can be identified as a single sine wave with all sorts of jiggly shapes, ups and downs, and what have you. That's what you are. The entire universe, or at least the universe that we know, follows this law. So we've established our connection like that, and we can put out light, and the light we put out is the entire electromagnetic spectrum, not just the visible spectrum, but for what we like to say is the light that your human body produces is a coherent white light, which means that you're like a little sun. And if your light is white, that means that you're putting out the entire spectrum. You can't even see what you're putting out. But you're putting out the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which means you're putting out, or have the capability of putting out, something that represents the entire universe, or the entire reality as perceived in the electromagnetic spectrum. In other words, if the entire universe, known universe in our 3D reality, could be represented by one big unique sine wave, all you have to do is have the ability to manipulate the curves and the ups and downs and frequencies of that travel of that wave to alter the entire universe. Do you understand how easy it is now? Now, again, how could that happen? Well, remember, with a radio, it's all about an amplifier. Now, what do you want to do with an amplifier? With an amplifier, you need to have more energy flowing, more signal. You've got to increase it. You've got a tiny, tiny signal. You know it's moving. You know those electrons are moving. But if you want to hear it, if you want to boost it and amplify it, you got to have a lot more electrons moving. You got to have a flow. Now think about when we talk about healing. You know, we talk about chakras, we talk about chi, all that sort of hocus pocus stuff. Well, think of current, the movement of this energy, electricity, if you will, light traveling, if you will, like a laser, whatever. Some fragment of the electromagnetic spectrum moving from point A to point B in a vector or a electromagnetic wave propagation. If you can imagine that, imagine a machine that can produce a little wave, a weak signal, or a big, huge transmitter that can transmit a big, strong signal that you can hear around the entire globe. And you could pick it up like they used to have in the old days. They would have a radio station in Tijuana broadcasting, I can remember it now, XALA, Tijuana, Mexico. I never understood what that meant until I read it once. Eques, of course, is X. Eques, like Dos Eques. XALA. Okay, so there's your four letters right there. Tijuana. Anyway, they got around the rules. They could broadcast a big ton giant signal. So what they do, they pumped a whole bunch of electricity into it, and they had a big, strong signal that went for a long ways. Okay? It was the same signal. It went up and down and oscillated the same amount, but it was really strong. It had a huge amount of intensity. It made it easy to detect. Remember, radar is all about detecting and analyzing. We want to find you. We want to know where you are. That's what we use radar for. We want to detect a missile coming at us, and we want to know its coordinates, its vector, so that we can vector a response from it to there, from us to it. We want to shoot at it. This is what we use radar for, only now they're using it on your phone to kill you with 5G. Anyway. So if you're a healer, basically what you've done is you've found a way to amplify your signal. You've become a big, huge amplifier. You can now detect faint signals, and you can now broadcast very strong signals. You become a very strong receiver, and you become a very strong transmitter. Now, how do we do that? Now, I've told you guys, you do that by increasing your chi flow. So in other words, instead of having a little skinny wire, itty-bitty antenna, you've now got a massive antenna. It's massive. It's huge. There's a lot more electrons there to go up and down instead of the few little electrons. By the way, when you understand this concept, you'll also understand why long hair helps you pick up more signals, because those are antennas. Hello? It's like having all those antennas hanging there, picking up waves. Oh, yeah. Now, there's a whole lot of math here, and basically what you have to understand is that, as I said at the beginning, it's all about movement. Okay? Obviously, when we do healing, we have intention, but believe it or not, there's some hand movement going on. And when I do Reiki, there's also hand movement going on. Now, the movement is really irrelevant, but what's important is the intention that you attach to the movement. Now, what does the movement do? The movement causes a movement of mass, which is basically causing electrons to go up and down. I'm sending out a signal with a flash of the hand, and when it gets to its target at the speed of light, which it will, it carries with it the intention in the frequency side of this wave that you're receiving. And remember, it contains light and it contains frequency or radio information. So I hope this is starting to make sense, because intention really is so much of it. And then, of course, what's really important to understand is that we're talking about here something that's physical and tangible, like light. We can see it, we can feel it, it burns your skin. But at the same time, we're talking about something that's not tangible, like a radio signal. You can't see a radio signal, but you can hear it if you amplify it with a radio and an antenna. You basically pick up something that detects that movement of a magnetic field, or the movement of the electrons, the energy, the current. You're detecting a change of current, which is energy. And of course, the light, well, I guess they switch back and forth. But what you've got to understand is that these things, they're always equal. They always travel next to each other. And the direction that they turn follows that right-hand rule. And if you work on your ability to amplify these signals, which basically means that your body is capable of moving large amounts of energy through it, like a fire hose instead of a straw, that's really what you have to do. You have to boost your ability to do that. Well, I know that's beginning to start to sound a little bit vague, but one of the things I want to say here real quick is that when you understand this relationship between energy and radio frequency, you can basically take that information and you can use it to do anything. Like, for instance, you can find out where you can find a wave. If a wave is coming at you through the universe, you can find it. You can measure it. You can see which way it's coming, which way it stands up, how strong it is, how dense it is. You can focus it. You can do all kinds of things. Why is that important? Because that's how they make weapons. I don't really want to talk about that, but basically, microwave oven, I talked about a microwave oven briefly. What does a microwave oven do? You've got a water droplet, which is another dipole, and it's sitting there, H2O, it's sitting there. And they send a microwave signal at it, which is exactly 2.4 gigahertz. And that up and down signal of that microwave coming at that water causes that water molecule to violently go back and forth. It tips over 90 degrees, and it tips over the other way 90 degrees. It makes it water molecule travel 180 degrees. It flip-flops. Now, you can imagine if you were a water molecule and some energy was coming into you and telling you that you had to flip-flop. Why is a water molecule do that? Well, because it's made up of three particles, and two of them have got I believe, a negative charge, and two of them have got a positive charge, and the other one's got a negative charge. So there's that plus and minus thing. Remember? That's just like the antenna. So it's essentially an antenna. And your microwave causes that thing to flip back and forth. Obviously, this could be done to you. But when you understand these things, you'll understand that by changing the electronic energy density, you also change the magnetic energy density and vice versa. And they travel at the speed of light. You can use this information to measure the density. Hell, what does this all mean? That means if the enemy is using microwave weapons, they're using scalar weapons, they're using electromagnetic frequency weapons, light weapons, or radio weapons, or microwave weapons. That means that our bodies can counter anything they can send at us. All we have to do is want to do it. Just the same way as healing. You've got to have the intention. There's your force field right there. Once again, I've told you guys, if you want to be able to transmit energy and not just be a receiver, there you go. There's that radio receiver versus the radio transmitter. It's better to be a transmitter than a receiver, because otherwise, if you're a receiver, then you're going to sit there and tune your dial and you're going to get what you get. But if you're a transmitter, suddenly you're putting out the signal. You're making the water go back and forth. You're sending the information. You're altering reality. You're healing. You're breaking the matrix. You're doing whatever you want. Now, if your antenna and your amplifier is stronger than everybody else's amplifier, what happens? You drown out every other radio everybody's receiving. Now, if you have a world of receivers, if everybody's listening to the radio instead of trying to be a transmitter, well, guess what happens? Pretty soon, it's your frequency which is causing their molecules to go up and down and resonate. And that changes their reality. We didn't even really get into scalar, but just be advised. Anytime you have a sine wave traveling in orthogonal direction with equal frequency and amplitude on each polarity, you create scalar information. All right? It's that simple, people. All you got to do is master it. And all you got to do is want to do it, because that's the nature of reality. It really is. Once again, we're going to have a relatively short show. It's about 7 o'clock. I'm just going to stop for a minute. Just a really quick break, two or 3 minutes, and then I'll take some calls real quick. But otherwise, I want to thank you for tuning into the physics of healing. Hope sense to everyone because it's really that easy. And the point is that you got to become an amplifier, which means that you got to be putting out. You don't want to just be putting out a subtle signal. That's great if you want to be a psychic. You could be your tuner. Your receiver is really strong. But if you really want to change the world and change the matrix, you got to be a strong amplifier. Okay. I mean, you're a strong amplifier, so you send out a strong signal, drown out all the other signals. With that, we're gonna take a break. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, go ahead and mute for me, please. All right, I just want to say I realize that a lot of you normally would be tuning in right now, but those of you that are out there, of course, welcome. I see Paul Meyer. I see a lot of our friends out there, and obviously, I just want to first of all point out a few things. Certainly times are rough, and I talk about sine waves, I talk about amplitude and frequency, and if anything, we'll say right now that the crap happens at a greater frequency, and the amount of crap that happens is at a higher amplitude. And that goes along the same way when it's going up. We get greater, good things happen more often, and they happen at a greater amount of good. That's frequency and amplitude. That's a perfect example. Oh, Bob Sherman's trying to join us. So go ahead, we'll bring Bob in here. Oh, come on, Bob. You missed. Oh, there he is. All right. Anyway, let me just say this, first of all, before Bob says anything, you stay muted, Bob, is that we're under a big attack, first of all, a lot of us. And there's a lot of bitterness. There's a lot of toxic. I like to think of it as like a poison that's been spread, and as it spreads, and it does its damage. And once the poison has been injected, it tends to spread out. And obviously, hopefully, its concentration is such that it will become weaker. But the point is that if you look at all the physical human stuff that's going on that we're dealing with, and if you look at all the extremely strong backlash coming from the dark side because of what we're doing to them, we knew this was coming. We knew to expect it. And as I told everybody, it is a roller coaster. And on this roller coaster, we're going to go up and down more and more times, and we're going to go higher and we're going to go lower each time we do it. And this is just the way it is, and it's going to continue like this on the way out. When you throw in the fact that we're having all sorts of planets in retrograde, that's basically they're all behind each other in the shadow of the sun or whatever, where we don't have that energy coming at us or whatever it is, it changes things. We had a big eclipse. There's all kinds of stuff. So bottom line is, what does this mean? Remember, all reality is based on movement, distance, the speed of light. So obviously these objects are huge amounts of mass traveling at precise ranges and speeds and directions and orbits and what have you. And the interaction of this movement with the scalar energy of the light coming from the sun or coming from the center of the galaxy or wherever, coming from your cells, all of this works together. All of it works together in a very, very fine dance. And we need to be aware of it, because as we become woke or closer to the end, which we are so close to, you're going to see extremes. You should be noticing the dual polarity of everything by now. If you haven't gotten through the biggest message of this show, it's that this reality that we know is extremely dual polarity. For every direction it goes in the opposite direction. For every up and down, there's a sideways, or there's a right and left. For every east and west, there's a north and south. This is the nature of the universe. And like I said, we've been under a lot of attack, and obviously the Q group is under a lot of attack, and there's lots of toxicity and venom. And on top of that, we have people going through the COVID bullshit, which is just incredibly bad and getting worse. And this stresses out everybody, which changes the dynamic of everything. And unfortunately, it's made it so difficult to cause movement in a direction we want, because the opposing force is just so strong that those of us that are trying to do that find ourselves not wanting to do it. And we're all guilty of it. I know I certainly have been very sensitive to it, but at the same time, there's a lot of people out there with security issues and desires to move forward, and unfortunately, this is causing drama that has affected not just myself, but RD, who has supplied the alt account for access to Facebook, because I'm obviously in jail constantly, and this is as the result of actions taken by Trump players. Now, this is an ongoing thing, and again, I'm I asked for help, but at the same time, my motivation to try to keep doing this is hard, or difficult to come up with. So I hope you can appreciate the effort that went into this show. And I don't really want to suggest there was a lot of effort, but I think it's important to get that out there, because I think, obviously, from a cultural standpoint, the quicker we all basically acclimate to these simple facts, this physics of reality, the sooner we can transition to the next step. And I hold out hope, because as I'm beginning to say so often now, I do fear that the majority of the humans alive today will not transition in the right direction. And I'm hoping that we can make that change, because I don't want to be in 4D, and it sure looks like we're entering 4D in a really fast way, and we want to be in 5D. So basically, if we have to go through 4D, you're going to have to know this stuff, okay? And the magic, or whatever you think is ridiculous, the ability to cause that movement, the ability to move that energy, to make those electromagnetic waves, to send those intentions at the speed of light to the target of your choice in the density and focus that you want, in the amount of area and length, all that, Superman style, then you better learn. And this is, you gotta understand, anything can be explained. All right. Anyway, so first of all, I just want to say hi, Bob.
Hey, congratulations, Professor.
Yeah. Well, okay. Listen. Whoa, dude. Man. There is a professor, of course, that I did see. I ran across on Facebook, and I was just, because I'm depressed and stuff, and he starts talking about electromagnetic waves. I go, okay, I'll watch this. Of course, it's some hardcore physics. But when I saw the whole thing about the spectrum being backwards, I'm like, whoa, holy crap. I'm like, wait a minute, why has he got infrared over here when it should be UV? And I'm like, But, that's amazing. I went my entire life without realizing it, when I should have known better, because I know that information and light travels. But anyway, the gist of what we're trying to show here is if you dive really deep into the physics. And the reason why most people do this sort of stuff is so that they can calculate the distance of stars and the size of the sun and the energy density coming out of the sun. I mean, I can tell you what the average amount of energy is coming out of the sun at a given altitude, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is the sort of thing that these physicists need to do when they're making spacecraft or submarines or long-range telescopes, or you name it. And unfortunately, I was wrong. Okay, but listen, I got to tell you, I'm not going to spend too much time here. So if anybody wants to get in here real quick, because I'm really upset about the place I'm going to go out. I have to decide, do I want to do a show at the regular time and all that, or do I want to go this place and have my, 30 minutes of relaxation drinking the damn beer? And I got to say, it's like people say that, you never see me relax. No, you don't. You want to see me relax? Hit me up about 30 minutes after I've had a pint in front of me. Okay, you'll see me relaxed. Otherwise, I'm on go 24/7, and it's why my heart is struggling. All right, Bob, what else? Anything else while you're here? It's been a while since you've been here. No? All right. Well, anyway, I just want to say that you see, RD has been going through a lot of crap, because I have a lot of fans, okay, and some of them happen to be women, and sometimes women do crazy things, especially when it involves another woman and some guy like me that they're interested in. And this can cause drama, especially if you're ID and you're my alt, and you've got some significant other that's seeing something that's directed to somebody else and not you. But and they're like, who's this? But anyway, that happens. And unfortunately, like I said, I did find a Trump troll, which was bizarre, because I didn't normally look for the stuff, but I should. But anyway, there he was, and he was like, an African gentleman from, an African country. I don't know what it was, but you could tell by the pictures pretty easily what he was. And he was very pro-Trump, and so it's kind of a weird dynamic right there. But I'm assuming that he was one of the people that might have been causing some problems. It's kind of like a mole that's in there reporting you every time you write something. So I think that'll probably make life a little less painless. Anyway, but that's, like I said, that's kind of a stressful thing, and I know RD's all stressed out, and he's been wanting to do stuff, but I'm trying to keep him from doing it because it's a knee-jerk thing, and we have to be kind of careful when we do stuff like this because we're at a big disadvantage right now. They're using everything they've got to stifle us, and obviously they're afraid of us or they wouldn't be doing it. And if you look at the situation right now with the way people are, and I'm not really talking about, I mean, obviously the protests are a big part of this, but the point is that it's just like those antennas. You're all antennas, and all they got to do is send out a certain wavelength, and you jump up and down. And if you ask me, it's like the TV. You think, okay, TV, I can look at TV and it's not going to do anything. No, the TV is putting out the light, and it's putting out the frequency, and it's putting out the scalar, all right there, and you're right there next to it. There's the distance, and it's reaching you at the speed of light. And if you think the energy inside your body, all of it, on every frequency is going up and down exactly the way the light's telling it to do, yes, that's happening. It's playing you like a little damn robot. So the people that think that's not happening, you have to realize everything, just because you don't understand the mechanics of this phenomena that we know as reality, otherwise, in scientific circles referred to as the electromagnetic spectrum, if you understand how that stuff works, and usually that requires a little bit of math, you'll see it's all really super simple. And the rules that it follows are really easy to see how it works when you factor in these rules. And it's like all you got to do is get a little tiny piece of information, and given the speed of light, you can come up with all kinds of stuff. Hey, given this information right here, I realized that I can do healing, and I can use a Carillion camera to basically record the changes of the light modulation being put out by my body while I'm sending off this intention. And right away, I can take that information, and using the speed of light, I can calculate the exact frequency that I was generating. And right there, now you've got the damn frequency that you can create with a radio that will do the same healing. Okay? So in other words, anything you can do with a machine, you can do with your brain. And anything you can do with your brain, you can do with a machine if somebody's smart enough to make that machine. Okay? But that's reality. And here's the other thing, and I don't want to say this is a plus minus male female, but the good guys, your Palladians and such, they don't use the machines, they use their brains. Okay, their Akashic records, it's in their brains. Their time travel, their all that, it's done by their brain. The other guys, it's all done by a machine. Okay, it's like using a calculator to do math instead of doing it in your head. It's just the way it is. Particles versus wave. Anyway, all right, Bob, I think I'm going to get out of here, okay? Is that cool? You mind? Yep. Bobby, say goodbye to Bobby. You're not muted, dude. What's going on? Oh, you're not there, huh? Oh, I see. Okay. You're like, what? I'm here. All right, anybody. All right, Bob, I'm going to let you go. All right, get out of here. I do hope you enjoyed that. And I do hope you took some notes. But truly, the ability to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum, or either part of it, the light or the frequency, allows you to change any portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is nothing less than our entire reality. So once again, I'll tell you, whoever figures out how to do it first is going to affect the reality of everybody else. Okay? So that, I'm going to remind you that my name is Stephen Kelley. This is the Stephen D. Kelley Show. Whoa. We are Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. And once again, if you did want to help out with the PayPal, I know it's kind of distasteful, especially when I'm so negative right now, but let me just say this. If you got removed from Facebook or something like that, or whatever, blocked, it's because of some drama. And I don't exactly know the extent or who's who, or if somebody's trying to use a fake profile or what, but we just had this drama, and unfortunately, heads had to roll before we could stop the hemorrhaging or whatever it was that was going on. All right, so I hope you guys understand that, and hopefully we'll be able to get to the bottom of it, especially since I removed that troll. And it'll get better, and we can all be friends again. But right now, it's just I hope you understand that because of the energy, we had to just make a couple of adjustments. All right. So with that, I do hope you tune in next week. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Please share it. Please make a comment, like it, of course. But obviously, a tiny, tiny portion of people make comments compared to the number of people that watch it. So if you take the time to watch it, especially this isn't a long one, please make a comment, okay? And if there's something that you didn't know or that I said wrong, please let me know, okay? With that, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it already, please. Just for my ego. Kidding. All right. Let me see. How's it go again? All right, everybody. Good night. God bless. Adios. And goodbye.